All right, I will now introduce our guest. Sandra Sidman Larson grew up in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, a suburb of New York City. We will not hold it against her. Her professional career encompassed many decades of work in the nonprofit world of social services and justice in Minnesota, where she has lived for the past 50 years. Poetry became her avocation in 1985 when she began classes at the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis. In 2011, she was selected for and participated in a manuscript development track at the Loft. She has published 7 books of poetry: This Distance in My Hand, Main Street Rag 2017, With No Intention of Arrival, Cup and Spiral Books 2021, and What Shall We Do Now, a memoir in poetry, Cup and Spiral 2022 are her most recent. Joyce Sutphen grew up in a farm in Stearns County, Minnesota. Her first book of poetry, Straight Out of View, won the Barnard New Women's Poets Press Prize in 1995. Her second book of poems, Coming Back to the Body, Holy Cow Press 2000, was a finalist for a Minnesota Book Award. And her third book, Naming the Stars, Holy Cow Press 2004, won the Minnesota Book Award in poetry. Her recent books are Carrying Water to the Field, New and Selected Poems, from the University of Nebraska Press, This Long Winter from Carnegie Mellon, and That Other Life, 2023. She has served as the Minnesota Poet Laureate from 2011 to 2021, succeeding Robert Bly, and she is a professor emerita of literature and creative writing at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter, Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Sandra Sidman Larson and Joyce Sutphen.
I think I'll try this.
It is all yours.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Michael, and thanks to Annie and to everyone in the store, and for you all coming tonight. I just want to say that one of my colleagues at this moment, probably a little bit, I don't know exactly what time it is right at this minute, but whenever the ball game starts, Phil Bryant from the English department at Gustavus is throwing out the first pitch or something. And so let's all make a hopeful kind of lift to bring that ball right over. I think President Bergman's going to be out there too. We've had a great president for the last bunch of years, and so we've been really lucky. She's retiring too. We all retire, someday. So Sandy and I met a couple summers ago up in Grand Marais at a workshop at the Grand Marais Arts Colony, which is a wonderful place. If you haven't ever thought of going there, maybe consider it. And it was October and November and really bright. You thought you remembered it as cold? Cold, hot,
Crazy,
cold,
crazy.
hot. So then we saw each other at another poetry event, and we said, we both have books that we didn't really do anything for, little orphan books. and so we thought, let's see if we can, let's read together. What should we, how could we make our 2 books kind of go together? Well,
I was thrilled, of course.
I was thrilled, really thrilled too, and I thought there isn't too much of a trick to it. All we have to do is talk and read poems. So that's what we're gonna do. We got together. No, more than a couple. I think we got together 3 or 4 times, and we talked, we emailed, and
The
we were.
problem was, though, we kept talking about things other than our reading.
And we went to lunch, and we went to coffee, and we, yeah, and I think we could even lift a glass later.
Yeah.
Not before, though.
No.
But, I mean, how many poetry readings do you go to where you can have a glass of wine if you feel like
Not
it? Just, so, it's a good deal. I think what we're gonna do is, we're gonna take turns reading, and then we'll talk a little bit, and each time we read together, we'll have a little underlying theme, not too heavy or anything, but, and the first one is, we're kind of taking the same period in our lives, not necessarily the same 10, 12 years. We're taking the time when we were in our college and young, adult time, and what things were like then. Even though Sandy, I think it's hard, I shouldn't say anything
Oh, yes, you can.
about age. I learned my lesson when Connie Wanick and Tom Tamaro and I edited the Minnesota, to sing along the way Minnesota women poets, and we put birth years. And we never thought of that, and then people were saying, thanks a lot. And I said, but you don't look,
Yeah.
So, but you are a lot more years older than I am, but I feel older than you. But there are reasons.
Okay, so 1937 I was born.
Okay, 1949. So, she's amazing. Amazing, and she's ready to take on the whole world. So, in the interests of justice and fairness and kindness. So, Sandy, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll start it out.
Can I leave my little book wedged here?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
You leave it there, yes.
You can see how it went.
Start off right away.
Another year.
Is there a doctor in the room?
There probably is.
There probably is. Now, this is interesting. I think I've got to get, oh, here it is, I'm sorry. I just want to say that what we got thinking about was that, for me, the 60s were my 20s, kind of, and for Joyce, the 70s were. And I kind of feel as a silent generation person, now at 87 years of age, that I was born between things. So we had Ginsberg, Howell at City Lights in the 50s, and then we had the Summer of Love in 67, so there was sort of a gap in there. And so I came up in an age of the World War II generation, so everything was set, and all sexual roles and attitudes were, and so I kind of started going through that transition. But it's interesting to know someone who came a little later, what did that mean to them? Anyway, I'm going to look up my cheat sheet so I can get the right poem for you. And the other thing we found out, I said, well, I went to San Francisco then, and she said, well, I went to New Jersey. That was kind of interesting. Yeah. So I ended up, yes, in the early 60s. My husband was interning at a hospital in San Francisco, so that's how I ended up there. And that's what I'm going to read you kind of about. Sort of covers some of the whole time. Okay, can you hear me? Am I okay? Yeah, okay. Wait a minute now, that's not it. This distance in my hand, I tell you why, I'm not in the right book.
See, I think my book being in there messed.
Okay, here we go. A view from the 27th floor of the San Francisco Sheraton Hotel. 1. I see past Twin Peaks, the hate, our old neighborhood, our apartment on Waller Street, where every morning I carried the groceries up 3 flights of stairs. Pregnant and weighed down by my ballooning form, I lumbered along, catching cable cars to work, making the steep and breathless climb up over impossible hills, hanging on to my choices. And every morning I got sick at work while entering accounts receivable for imports and exports at Balfour Guthrie and Company over on Market Street. And down in North Beach, Carol Doda wore her revolutionary topless swimsuit, danced and stripped at the Condor, displaying sensational breasts built with the first ever silicone injections. And not long after that, Allen Ginsberg, who had grown more notorious day by day, reading How at City Lights, was poetically more open about himself and his own seminal juices. And our neighborhood began to change as psychedelic posters popped up in our local storefront window, and young women sprouting long flowering skirts congregated at the corners. 2, after you were drafted, we left San Francisco in our beat-up Ford with all our possessions, 2 children, 1 unborn, and our 3-year-old in the back seat, wondering how long the trip would be. We followed the Vietnam War around, finally arriving in Washington, D.C., among the wounded and limbless at Walter Reed Army Hospital. There the tear gas and cherry blossoms bloomed, and billions of others, and me among them, protested the war, and later all wars to come. And when the conflict came home, we divorced, each of us setting out again. I continue to cling to my belief that the ending will be buried as we walk the flat paths of our separate lives. That time will recolor these canyons once the trail, oh wait a minute, I turned the wrong page. Carol, oh, hey, we're gonna go over a review what happened next. Carol eventually left the Condor, formed a rock band, the Lucky Stiffs, and started a lingerie shop, leaving behind her sobriquet, San Francisco's other favorite Twin Peaks. And Allen, once a Dharma bum, took up with Ann Waldman, creating the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics, invited everyone to attend, and went on to win a National Book Award. 3, the afternoon, now I'm back in the hotel. The afternoon outside these high windows recedes. The sea smoke arrives at its appointed hour, embracing the hillsides, the streets, and I imagine the entrance to our old apartment, the iron-gated doors guarded by 2-fisted begonias, still holding tightly to the past with all its passion, all its promise, and all that didn't last. Now, it's interesting because the Flower Children were 67, and so that, you know, that sort of whole blowing up of the cultural changes happened sort of after I left, but then I arrived in Washington, D.C. for the whole anti-war movement. I got sort of involved in that, so to the point to an FBI agent said to me, "Cool it." But this is again on San Francisco, because I think so many people out there, and you're at the edge of the land, and you just think, can I go any further? What am I going to do next? So this is, the title of this poem is On Edge in San Francisco. Lo, the dove returned, bearing in her mouth an olive leaf plucked off, as Noah said. Genesis 8:11, that's the epigraph. A shallow shawl of birds, refusing to be named, floats in the eucalyptus-scented air. See them here? These young refugees from Minnesota, Iowa, Utah, trying to find a brand new start, working at the Sphinx coffee store, sitting in small espresso stops, staring at the onyx surfaces of their lives, and hungering for a taste of revelation, as the sun's slanting rays create bright crystal crosses in their glass cups, and the church bells call from Washington Square. Book browsers surface from city lights, Shopkeepers roll down their metal grills as the sun sinks over the hills. No answers at the edge of this last place. No news to be found in a bird's mouth. Just gotta find my page here. Again, I think having been at Walter Reed Hospital and seeing all the damage and soldiers returning was such a searing experience, and one that has sent me as an anti-war person since those days, I think. The title of this poem is Seasons of Memory, and the epigraph for this poem is, Mother, all you remember is how you feel. You don't remember anything. Which is sort of true. My son Andrew's complaint at age 16. I've read recently that medical researchers are working feverishly to create pills to improve the memory. We really want to dwell on the past? The missing limbs, old enemies, waiting rooms, burnt skin? How would we appreciate the moment, a spring day of cherry blossoms, if we were forced to live in such a tenement of overcrowded memories? My son Andrew was only 5 in 1968 when we visited the orthopedic clinic at Walter Reed Army Hospital. We sat in the waiting room with stacks of books to read, waiting for ghost pictures of his femur and predictions about whether breaking it again would spur the growth of his one short leg. All the other patients were men in blue and white seersucker robes and army-issued slippers. I didn't ask Andrew what he thought of them, those without their limbs, part of their skulls blown in. On our way home, we drove around the tidal basin, huge marble buildings with a triumphal feel of Rome, cherry blossoms from Japan fringing everything. I barely remember my mother's cousin who survived the Bataan Death March and a Japanese prisoner of war camp. Everyone is moving toward death, but marching there was a different story, or so they said. He never spoke of it. Hundreds and hundreds of men dropping silently that spring. Like a failed cherry blossom once home, he didn't last. The only bone I've broken was my arm in the field at Camp Nyota as a girl. Dearie, this is gonna hurt, said the doctor. One hand on my shoulder and the other holding my wrist. He took the arm and yanked it in one perfect motion. Flan Tree Kim Folk, the little girl running down the road trailing her burning skin. I read not long ago that she's in Paris, and the green beauty of Vietnam is bringing the tourists back again. After the organizing, after the protests, I was home, as I recall, each afternoon when the boys returned from school. This year, I hear the cherry blossoms are already blooming in Washington, D.C. No tear gas, no police in plastic helmets with mouth guards running right toward us, batons raised, or the thousands of protesters on the mall. Now there is just the honed granite wall. And I have forgotten what the argument was about or what Andrew first began to bring me flowers in spring. Comfort is a complicated forgetting and remembering. Thanks. Yeah, watch out for this. It's lethal here.
You know, it's been really interesting hearing Sandy's poems that are on the same time period that some of my poems are, and thinking about my sonnets that I've been using for the last 10 years, I'd say, and wondering what the difference in the impression is to have such big material wrapped in a little package like that. So I will just be interested to hear what you think. I mean, is it too big for too little, or does it do something different with the things that we're both that we both experienced.
Well, I think it's good that it's
Yeah.
like a different prism on a.
Yeah, we're getting to put it in the air for you tonight, you can think about it. So the first, I think, I was going to read a different one, but I'll read the, not the Summer of Love, and then May 1970. So this book is arranged, starts out with that about 1968, 67, and goes up to the present, but in that section, just until about maybe 73, for me, those were the years where I could make a chronograph that had all kinds of entries in it, because something seemed to be happening every few days that was memorable, and I just knew what everything looked like and where everyone was, and so not the Summer of Love. These are not necessarily historical. They're historical.
Your history.
My history. So just you'll find some interesting gaffes, and you can point them out. Not the Summer of Love. Everyone else was going to San Francisco, wearing flowers in their hair, singing, "Come on, people now, smile on your brother," or "Look what's happening down the street, got a revolution, got a revolution." But we went east, flying students standby, taking a cab to the Y, eating the cheapest things on the menu, still thinking we might apply at the Kelly Girl place. Until one day we went to Harvard Square and met Steve from Vietnam, and his best friend Dog from nowhere, with their guitars and tabs of LSD, which we were afraid to try. I'm telling you this now with a sigh. I apparently never said that before. I'm telling you this now with a sigh. What would have happened, who knows? And this book, my book and your book are filled with something that I love about life, is that there are all these Dickinsonian moments, as in Great Expectations, when Pip says, who knows what chain of gold or lead we weave for ourselves when we make a decision. We decide that we're going to leave the apartment and drive to St. Paul, which we never do, speaking in some royal ethereal voice, and we do that, and we meet a person who changes everything, and that happens all the time to all of us, and to, it's a fact of life. I forgot to bring my timer up, Sandy, so I'll just not talk quite as much and now read.
No, we're okay.
Read May 1970. So the biggest thing that happened that month, of course, was Kent State, and which, songs like poems hold things for hold events and hold people how they felt at a certain time, and I think Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young's song, Tin Soldiers and Nixon's Coming, We're Finally on Our Own, that there's no song that fits a time period better than that one. May 1970. He was driving my car. That's one thing that was wrong. and I didn't know his real name, but that was entirely a different problem. If you would have asked me then, I would have said something analogous to freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Apparently, I was immune to the usual entanglements, marriage, a job, some kind of future. One little pill was the ticket. If we had consulted the gurus or even the local priest, they would have gone pale. They would have crossed themselves in dismay. But we went on with him at the wheel and that new name tucked between us. Ominous for her, foolish child that she was. And we did come as kids, you know. I think I went to college in knee socks and a plaid wool skirt, and the next year I was wearing a green army fatigue and Stop the War, and where those old college clothes went, I have no idea, but college was not the same for a long time, never.
Yeah.
One or two more on this, I think maybe one. Moving to the mountains, we're still in the spring of 1970. That spring, Richard Nixon was the president, and his tin soldiers shot 4 students in Ohio. We drove the Dakotas into Montana, into the high places where the snow was falling, dropped down into Yellowstone about the 12th of June. Waterfalls crashed, geysers erupted, hot springs, the color of morning glories, bubbled and steamed. We pitched our tent on the pine needle floor, made a fire in the rain. In Colorado, our friends were waiting in a white house in Gilpin County. All summer, we sat on the porch watching the horses graze. The sky, a purple rain. I just asked you, why did I do that? How could have I done that? And did I really do it? With that word rain at the end, I thought of it a couple days ago when I was reading the book itself, and because I often print out I just print in the manuscript, and that might be proof that it says haze. It should say haze because purple rain, purple rain. Prince wasn't singing in 1970, but Jimi Hendrix was, and and it rhymes. I mean, why would I not miss that opportunity? So that's not on historical matters. I'm sorry for diverging. So I think we move on. I also.
Although I want to say this, so when I was in my 20s, and again another era, and women got married very early, and I didn't necessarily have to do that. In fact, I didn't necessarily want to, but it turned out that I did. So as I said in that poem, I'm walking around with kids and, having just all that experience.
Sandy,
and then you were out there, you were roaming around.
I did spend time protesting the war too, and
Yes.
and actually, I don't know if anybody remembers a group called Beaver 55 that opened the draft files in
Friends of mine.
Peter was one of the Minnesota 8.
Well, there's a man who could give us a long saga, and mine is just that we made sandwiches for Brad Beneke and that part of the contingent, and so we were right in there. And but you know, we'll talk more about our different temperaments about that. You're a fireball of energy and
You've
Red.
done so much, don't say.
So anyway,
Get there.
two kind of
Okay, we'll
things
talk.
that will change again.
Look out, Sandy.
Yes, I'm listening.
We should do a little.
Poetry and drama.
No, I think that another topic we've talked a lot about again is, I think I mentioned it, is feminism and the sexual revolution. And of course, I grew up in a very, the 40s and 50s, which was just, of course, we got into Elvis Presley and rock and roll and all that, but still it was different, I think. And we didn't travel around and go knocking on people's doors. You're going to talk about that maybe in a little bit. Yeah, but anyway, so it was a very interesting time, and I don't know how I escaped it. I think it was Simone de Beauvoir, because I kept thinking, I'm going to go out and do something, I'm going to have a career. And everybody's like, well, you can't do that, you can be a teacher, you can be a nurse, but you can't be other things. And I said, well, why not, Well, girls don't do that. And so everybody's trying to make me feel strange, and I did feel strange, but I thought, no, but this is the way I feel. I want to do something. So my goal in a short matter was that I decided I was going to go to law school at some point. But my constitutional law teacher at the University of Minnesota, who was my advisor, said, you're my best student, but you can't go to law school. I said, why? I said, well, you wouldn't be feminine anymore. Now, this is a really nice guy. I mean, this is just his, attitude of the time. Because he was trying to be careful. He said, you can go to law school, you can be first in the class, but you won't get a job. No matter what you do, you're going to have trouble. And I don't think in the University of Minnesota at that time, maybe there were a couple women, I don't know. But anyway, of course, it gave me tremendous respect for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she was just about 2 years older than I was. And she was able to get there. I had child care problems, and I'm a dropout from Georgetown Law School, I have to tell you. So anyway, this is a poem I wrote, not one of my better poems, but it's to Ruth, and it's an acrostic. In other words, the first letter of each line spells her name going down. You can't see that. A salute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Ruth, unknown to me, just a little older than I, you were my twin spirit. What a crazy idea we had as young women. The response, ha ha ha, you want to do what? Become a lawyer? Women are not supposed to be lawyers. After all, they must marry, carry babies, decide what to cook for dinner, and ironing shirts takes much time too. End this fantasy, I was told. You're probably told that too. Risk so much if you go to law school. You will gather so much trouble around yourself, folks added. It'll be the path to the destruction of your femininity. Not a single law firm will hire you, whether you're first in your class or not. So listen, you didn't, and I didn't either. But that's another story for you, and at least a chapter for me. Ultimately, equality for women, more of it for us, one of our biggest accomplishments, rising to the highest court in the land, so respectful, but for me, I also understand so well the ground you first stood on. Brava, dear Ruth, brava. Didn't I say that? I'm sorry. Then I'm going to go back into childhood, but this also has to do with feminine perceptions. Whistling girls and cackling hens always come to some bad end. That was one of my mother's favorite admonitions to me when I did things she didn't approve of. If whistling girls might escape aprons like my mother wore, and large breasts like Jane Russell's, I thought I might practice more. When I whistled, I pursed my lips and tried to blow so forcefully my breasts would never look like the overblown pear of Rita Hayworth. I whistled and whistled. Summers I slipped into jeans, went bare-chested, rode horses on Uncle Hap's farm, where the sweet smell of hay, like the horses themselves, rushed out when the latch was lifted and the barn door swung wide. I galloped into a blaze of restless field of dandelions. When I noticed swelling behind my nipples, I upped the volume of my whistling. But Mother told me finally I had to wear a shirt. I still held out a stubborn hope that when I grew up, I'd be free to ride by mountain streams where water rushed and changed, but like me, kept its own sound, its own shape. And I have a picture of me with my friend in our And then just one more poem. I'm just going to go back to my first chapbook, which was called Whistling Girls and Cackling Hens. But this is back to sort of a marriage poem. My first wedding anniversary. Don't go to the Midwest to school. You'll marry there and never come home. Eleanor Sidman. Don't be silly, Mother. That's not going to happen. Sandra Sidman. In midair, flung out like a sack of rutabagas from the arms of a mountain of a man dressed in lederhosen, swung wide into a cloud of noise, I asked myself, how did you get into this polka party? You can't even spell the name of the place. In Schlieff's little city with shining wooden floors, shaking, the grammar of my life was changing. These men in short pants could dance. My bridegroom was too reserved to move so fast. What are we celebrating? 7 months of pregnancy and morning sickness? No money? Little romance behind the pages of anatomy books? As the evening progressed, swept in and out through a veil of purple light illuminating an invisible symbol stamped on my hand, I was held to the floor of this smorgasbord of chaos. Women dressed in hardanger stitched vests, puffy white shirts and skirts stuffed with layers of petticoats, swayed and swirled. They danced with so much grace, while I, the newest immigrant, raised on ballet and ballroom dancing, stumbled across the floor. I'd brought only black clothes, my books, a silver tea set from an austere grandmother who never would have come here in the first place.
You know, I think I'm gonna take the book and just,
This one?
my book.
Your book.
Where did it go? Did I carry it? Oh, I did. I wouldn't just have to come all the way over here. I think it's safest if I stay here. You won't have to witness any disasters. Ha ha.
Oh, she's got another mic. Great.
Okay. So, yep, that's it. Okay. I think I can do this. And then I can relax a little bit more. Karen, I see you. Okay. So I'm gonna read. I want you to hear 3 or 4 poems in a row, okay? Marriage. What we know now that we didn't know then would fill a small library. We could write volumes on the subject, how to enter into it blindly, how to pretend it never happened, how to make each other over into something human again. If only we had relied on something else, or if nothing had really mattered as we said it did. Even now, it's hard to believe how long we walked on water, or was it air? We never could agree. My worst mistake was thinking I would change, and yours was thinking I never would. Yeah. Not my most cheery serious subject, but
I guess we both have that subject, right?
yeah. As it turned out, we'd been reading the maps all wrong. We hadn't planned on so much snow, and the towns we passed had names we never heard of. And as it turned out, we'd been listening to the wrong station and drove straight into the storm without hearing the reports that would have turned us around had we not been on the very edge of a chasm on a ledge that was beginning to crack and crumble in the place where we'd just been standing. Oof, that's right. In New Jersey, because you know that's where my path led for a while, we lived in the endless towns where one street ran into another, dismal places between the freeways and darkened train yards. The red eye of the drug company blinked, and on the corner someone was always waiting for the 32. Nights, I worked in a donut shop. I don't know if we were married then, but I don't think so, but soon I stopped working there and took the train up to Chatham to type in amps and volts. I liked that town and its red brick ways, like the post office and its minor miracles. I didn't mind sitting at the Verityper for hours, waiting for some small happiness. And just,
When did you write these?
I wrote these poems somewhere in the last 10 years. I mean, some of them, you know, some of them were in other forms before. For instance, that, I didn't read Moon Landing, 1969. But I have a long poem called Lunar Landing in my first book, and it's way over the top, you know, compared to, I think that I keep trying to pack everything sort of tightly into that little shape, and I don't digress very much, you know, I just, but there's no story there necessarily either. It's more internal, I think. This one isn't that way. This is an entirely little different poem, and just I want you to relax and just, it's called Things I Learned from My Mother-in-Law. I really liked my mother-in-law very much, and she had negotiated some territory before, and she was nice enough to give me some good advice. My own mom couldn't have given me any of this advice. Her advice would have been better and, you know, and maybe more for the life that I was really going to live, but at this time, this was good advice. Things I learned from my mother-in-law. Grocery shop every day. Shop like a Parisian. Get your baguette in the morning. Consult with the butcher in the afternoon. Have a glass of sherry every night. Never take sides. Never take sides. Simply listen and withhold judgment. Later, when she loves him again, she won't have to remember that you told her to kick the bum out. When criticized, affect a weary or confused expression, as if the matter under fire is only vaguely familiar. Pretend you were listening. Pretend that you are listening now. Open a secret bank account.
All right.
it's really hard to judge from our two poems because one, you write expansively and I write in this little shape and
That's interesting.
little, yeah, I think that's true. And I'm just gonna check here whether,
Those are sonnets, by the way.
Oh.
I know.
yeah, I'll read one more. The wrong dress.
Oh, yes.
The dress I wanted to wear was the right dress to wear that night. You didn't agree, so I went upstairs to change into the wrong dress. And because of that, I felt strange all night and I said the wrong thing to a person I wouldn't have been talking to had I been feeling more like myself. And I did not talk to the right person, the one who would have understood that I was only wearing the wrong dress and saying the wrong thing because I didn't know what else to do. The word I used was the one I wanted. You didn't like the sound of it, but that just convinced me that it was the perfect word. So, is this speaker, where does she stand on, politics? And it's hard to tell, but I think you know.
If I can get around this again.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes, we talked and we finally we realized that we had sort of different interests in the outer world, so to speak. And so we said, well, how are we going to do this? And then we said, well, maybe we should do some poems. Just where did we put our voice? To what did we put our voice? To what do we put our concern? Of course, there's lots of things that we did that, but we have different ones that we sort of got going on. And mine is that even though I grew up in New Jersey, it was sort of like a southern upbringing in some way, is because my grandparents, who I lived 10 minutes away from, had an African American woman, then called a Negro, as a maid or servant that came in. Now, she didn't live there, but she would, every time I was there, she was there, and her name was Blanche. And this book is actually dedicated to her, because as a child, I just adored this woman, and I saw her as sort of another grandmother, because she was kind of older than my mother. She had taken care of my mother, I think, at some point, too. So this is the poem that I wrote, and this is through 1937 to 1955. That's when I left high school, and I really just wrote to her, but I didn't see her after that. It's called In a More Privileged Place. Nana and Awa's house, 15 Parkway, Upper Montclair, New Jersey. A sharp buzz sounded in the kitchen, sending Blanche out through the pantry into the dining room. Nana had pressed a button under the dining room table, summoning Blanche for instruction, who would then disappear, returning with entrees for answers. Surrounded by porcelain plates and heavy silverware, always in her eyelet-trimmed white apron and green maid's uniform that reminded me, Nana's granddaughter, of spinach. Before dessert, I would escape to the kitchen to help Blanche with the undressing of dinner plates. I would take this time alone with her to ask why girls were always in the kitchen and boys such bullies at school were not. Miss Sandy Jane, swiping at the wisp of her hair graying on her forehead, mercy, mercy, she would explain, seeing this girl standing here in a happy place complaining. Miss Sandy Jane, ain't you got no worries bigger than that to cry about, girl? I would carry the silver pitcher to refill water glasses, trying not to spill out questions. But later I asked my mother, why couldn't we invite Blanche to dinner at our house? Mother was silent. So what's wrong with Negroes? Nana replied, Blanche is not like the others. She knows her place. On Sundays, with her brown hands floured to knead the dough, Blanche pressed down hard. She cracked the eggs just so, and scrambled her obligations into small clumps. I took them as love from Blanche, who I thought of as my sidewise grandmother. But where does she go by bus? What When does she go to church? If she comes here on Sunday, who takes care of her children while she is taking care of us? Does she have a husband? These questions and their answers left every night with Blanche on her homeward bus to Newark. And here's the one picture I do have of her that I treasure. You can see it later. But it's interesting. I can't find the book because I can't remember the title, but I knew there was a poem out here written by the opposite. There's some poems written by children of mothers who went off to take care of other people's children. So that was really interesting to me. I was going to read the next one, but in a more privileged place too. But really, just to summarize it, because I don't want to keep going on. But I would go to New York City, and on the train, the area in Lackawanna, and I'd see these tenements in Hoboken, and I'd see all this segregated people, and I kept saying, why is this so? Why does this have to be like this? It doesn't have to be. And then I would also listen to the radio at night, and I would hear from the gospel churches in Harlem. I'd listen to the music, and then I'd look out the window and I'd say, I'm going to change the world. So it became a really important issue to me, the injustices of our system at the time. And I was just, of course, a little girl. But later, in 1971, I couldn't go to law school. I ended up going to get a master's degree in social work and community planning. And I had some letters from Blanche and written to her, but then I'd lost touch with her. So this is an imaginary letter that I wrote to her. So this is in the form of a letter, not a poem. Baltimore, Maryland, 1971. Dear Blanche, I'm so sorry you and I have lost touch. Are you still alive, Blanche? I wish there was some way I could talk to you about race. So confusing as a child. Jesus taught me one thing, while those around me seem to think another. Oh, she gets upset about so many things, just too sensitive, my mother said of me. Skin color seemed to matter. Yes, treat everyone kindly, but keep in mind, black people are not quite as smart and need to be watched a little more carefully. It's hard to live in a world still separated into black and white, rich and poor. Luckily, it's a bit different now. I'm in graduate school at the University of Maryland School of Social Work, interning at the Maryland Human Rights Commission here in Baltimore. Thankfully, some friends I've made in graduate school and at the commission are black. I'm one of 3 white people at the commission offices. I've learned not only from my colleagues, but also from seeing the problems minorities face daily. I realize there's so much I don't think about, haven't experienced. Back at the School of Social Work, I'm fortunate to be in a special program with 40 students. Many are African Americans, so a mix of white and black students will often get together, especially after our community organizing meetings, and have endless discussions about race and racism. It may sound funny to say this, but Blanche, it is as if I finally got a chance to talk to your grandchildren, not just the children of my parents' friends, who were, of course, white. At school, talking about how I feel the pain of racism, the guilt brought expected blowback toward me. As the black students pointed out, it was never a life or death issue for me. I would never be strung up or even likely be shot or beat up by the police. I think I got the right advice when my classmates told me, don't worry about us, just worry about white people. Try to free them from their delusions. You sit at the table with whites, you hold the power, baby. That was inspiring, but was most painful when an African-American colleague I was closest to said one night, you may think we're fighting the same fight, but you can go home. You can leave us. We can never leave the scene. We are here permanently. No choice. Yes, you can be my friend, but my sister, not quite yet. I know, Blanche, this country's history of shame cannot be washed away. All I can do is work on it. Well, my fantasy letter is done. Since I can't talk to you anymore, when I was little, you just listened to me complain about something. You'd place your arms akimbo, tilt your head, look at me, and ask that question. Ain't you got anything more important to worry about, girl? And this question to this day absolutely dismounts me from my high horse. I don't think I'm riding one now, but I'm glad I put all this down, and regardless of its inadequacy, I just want to say thank you, and please forgive me for all I might and should have done, given your good example much earlier in life. love, Sandy. I go by that now. One more. Here we go. A better world. I trouble over the shadows still hanging from trees, American violence, the darkness of our history, even my own family's blindness, so little understanding, although long ago there were Quaker ancestors in my family. And how can I dismiss what more I could have done if I had been braver? If only slavery hadn't been so profitable, racism would not have bloomed like such an invasive species, seemingly impossible to beat out or completely tear out. Here on earth, it's possible to turn away from suffering, to think we can create a world without it or ignore it, but we can't have the stars without the night. I wonder, looking up into the dark heavens, how I can be free if you are not. Are the multitudes of stars sentinel for a better world? A world so expansive that every soul, not mine, not yours, but ours, would be one united universe of care. Blanche has been gone for so long, but even now I think of her, how she might have fared somewhat better in this century. Some changes have come about, and her granddaughter might at this moment be looking out her window and speaking into the dark night and those stars as I did long ago, saying, someday I'll go out and change the world, and maybe she will.
Ain't you got nothing better to worry about?
Girl.
Girl, ain't you got nothing better to worry about, girl? I'm gonna practice that one. Just say to myself. She's Sandy Larson. She did a lot already, and she's not finished. So, yeah. You know, I will just go on with a few little poems that seem to parallel.
But you also have some of your new ones you wrote too.
New ones?
Didn't you? The gun.
Oh, yeah, right, okay. I know exactly what to do now, thank you. So,
But whatever you.
no, I just lost my glasses, though. They must be somewhere in this.
You're there.
Thank you. They kind of blended in
They're
there.
lovely.
Okay. So, blessing the world, I think that matches pretty well with your last poem, which was called
A better world.
A Better World. Blessing the world. I mean the one that surrounds us, the one that causes such suffering and refuses to let us go. I mean that one. And the one full of stupidity, the one that some of us scroll endlessly, doom-raged and cursing, that one especially. I mean, what world we have left once we have covered the meadows with condos and strip malls. I mean, the poor, ruined earth beneath our deals, our markets and shares, where everything has a price, even here, even now, which is why we must bless the world with the part of us that made the music and the paintings, the bridges and the airplanes, the dictionaries, where the word for what we will do has not yet been invented.
Oh, lovely. Wow.
I got really happy when I was writing that poem, when I thought there are things, all kinds of things we haven't thought of. And there are things that we rely on and trust and believe in that once didn't exist because no one had thought it into being. So, I think I read these out of order, but that's okay. Oh, no, that was warm-up. I have a poem in this book that I won't read it right now, but it's playing with about 4 or 5 words, and it's just a silly thing, but just try it for yourself to warm up someday to speaking or anything. Just try to read that poem. What I did not know. Nope, I'm gonna read it. I maybe will at, let's see. John Keats. Well, let me read about John Keats for a minute, because there's part of the book that talks about other writers and other poets, and that is, I think we're sort of form and content sometimes. I'm all about the shape of things and the sound of things, and the meaning is in there. It's infused, but you tell us, you preach to us and you tell us how it
That was
goes.
good. Anyway,
So-
yes.
Forgive me, John Keats. The day we read an ode on a Grecian urn, I wasn't able to make them see it. I couldn't get them to hear your voice, to imagine you standing in the bare room, slowly circulating the vase, and slowly circulating the urn, noticing the lovers and the pipers and the town, and how it occurred to you that not one detail would change. No one would ever grow old here. The leaves would never fall. I tried to get them to think about art and life, how one is long and the other is short, and how death may be the mother of beauty. But forgive me, John Keats, I failed to let them see your hand, still warm, held out to us.
Nice.
Okay. Do you think I should read a new one? I don't know if I can locate that. Maybe we should just wrap it up and ask people to,
Questions or
yeah.
We've time for a few questions.
So
anybody?
that was rather abrupt. So let me more graciously thank you for being a really good audience, and ask if you've got some comments or questions for us. You might be able to, just put your finger on the culminating, conclusive and wonderful ending.
That's a lot.
I know you must have questions, Karen, and then,
Shirley.
so first and second, Shirley. Karen and then Shirley.
I noticed how the juxtaposition of the different approaches to words, similar events, but the different approach to how you use words in you and Sandy did. Sandy has a more forceful kind of
Narrative.
attack, narrative on it that was delightful, and then you're very soft. And then you hit us with a turn right at the end.
That's the form doing its work,
Yeah.
yeah. Shirley.
I just wanted to know, have you been writing poems for a long, long time? How did you get going?
I love poems first, and I love songs, and language. So I'm in simple terms, I'm like the person who likes paints and they're a painter. I love words and what words can build and just, yeah, everything in there. And I didn't think I was going to be a poet. I thought I might be a short story or a novelist. So I've got a little time left to write the great American novel. I don't know, maybe. I don't think so. Okay, thanks, Shirley.
Looks like we're done, and
Yeah.
maybe there's more refreshments and.
Perfect, indeed. And then there is also the book signing. So what we'll do now is we'll have the authors, we'll thank them one more time. And then the authors will make their way to the signing podium, and then you are all welcome to join us at the signing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You know what we should do? Make it one by one, and I'll buy one, and then we'll trade. We have a plan. Okay, so we'll have to go up there and deliberate. And deliberate at 15.